The most dangerous construction project in the world right now isn't a missile silo in the Gobi Desert of China. It isn't a submarine base carved into the ice of the Russian Arctic. It is a patch of fresh, gray concrete baking in the relentless sun of the Australian Outback, 300 kilometers south of Darwin. To the naked eye, scrolling past on Google Earth, it looks boring. It looks like a municipal parking lot or an extension to a regional airport. But if you measure that parking lot, if you look at the extreme width of the taxiways, the depth and reinforcement thickness of the pavement, and the precise blast radiuses of the surrounding earth-covered bunkers, you realize that this isn't built for Cessnas. It isn't even built for fighter jets like the F-35. This concrete is designed for giants. Specifically, it is designed to host the B-52H Stratofortress, a nuclear-capable heavy bomber with a wingspan so vast it requires specialized outrigger gear just to taxi without scraping the ground. For decades, the United States kept its heavy bombers on the island of Guam. That was the forward edge of American power, the tip of the spear aimed at Asia. But in the last 5 years, the strategic map has changed fundamentally. The rapid development and deployment of Chinese intermediate-range hypersonic missiles has turned Guam from a fortress into a cage. The Pentagon war planners know a terrifying truth. In the opening hour of a war over Taiwan, Guam will cease to exist as a functional airbase. So, they are moving the pieces. They are pulling the king and the queen back from the front lines and placing them in a fortress that China cannot easily reach. They are moving them to Australia. This isn't a retreat as the critics might claim. This is a reload. By parking nuclear-capable bombers at RAAF Base Tindal, the Western Alliance is building a southern fortress that complicates Beijing's math in a terrifying way. Welcome to Doctrine of War. Today we are looking at the concrete proof of the American pivot. The narrative you often hear in the mainstream press is that the US is overstretched, distracted by Europe and the Middle East, and retreating from Asia. The reality is much smarter, much colder, and much more aggressive. The US isn't leaving, it is digging in. It is trading the vulnerability of small islands for the strategic depth of a continent. The thesis for this episode is simple. RAAF Tindal is becoming the most important air base in the Southern Hemisphere. It is the unsinkable aircraft carrier that China cannot sink, cannot suppress, and cannot ignore. We are going to break down the Guam problem, the capabilities of the B-52 missile truck that turn a 70-year-old plane into a 21st-century killer, and why Australia has become the final fallback position for the free world. To understand why the concrete is being poured in the Northern Territory, you first have to understand the math of the kill chain in the Pacific. For 70 years, the US strategy was forward defense. You put your planes in Japan, Korea, and Guam. You stood on the enemy's doorstep and dared them to blink. That strategy worked when the enemy had short-range weapons. It does not work today. The People's Liberation Army Rocket Force, PLARF, has spent the last 2 decades building a weapon system designed specifically to break the American model of war. It is called the DF-26. Western intelligence analysts call it the Guam Killer. The DF-26 is an intermediate-range ballistic missile IRBM, with a verified range of 4,000 kilometers. It is road mobile, meaning it can be launched from the back of a truck anywhere in China, hidden in caves or forests, making it nearly impossible to hunt down before it fires. It carries a 1,200 kilogram warhead, which can be conventional high explosives or nuclear, at speeds reaching Mach 18. Here is the geography problem that keeps US generals awake at night. Guam is 2,900 kilometers from the Chinese coast. It is a tiny island, only 48 kilometers long. Andersen Air Force Base is a massive, unmissable target sitting on the northern tip. It has nowhere to hide. In a conflict, China does not need to defeat the US Air Force in the air. They don't need to win dogfights. They just need to destroy the concrete on the ground. A saturation strike of 100 DF-26 missiles would crater the runways, destroy the exposed fuel farms, and bury the hangars at Andersen Base in less than 20 minutes. The flight time is so short that the heavy bombers wouldn't even have time to taxi to the runway, let alone take off. They would be destroyed on the ground, burning in their revetments. If your entire bomber fleet is parked on a small island within range of the enemy's artillery, you have already lost. The US Air Force planners looked at this math and realized they had a catastrophic vulnerability. They needed a sanctuary. They needed a base that was far enough away to be outside the fat part of the missile envelope, the easy engagement zone, but close enough to launch strikes into the South China Sea. They needed a base with massive fuel reserves that couldn't be easily cut off by a blockade. They needed a base protected by a stable, English-speaking ally with a modern military of its own. They looked at the map. They looked past the Philippines. They looked past Singapore. And they saw RAAF Base Tindal. Tindal is located 15 kilometers outside the town of Katherine. It is 320 kilometers south of Darwin, deep in the Australian interior. Crucially, it is roughly 4,600 kilometers from mainland China. That extra distance, that 1,700-kilometer gap between Guam and Tindal, changes the physics of the war. It puts Tindal at the extreme edge, or potentially just outside the effective combat range of the DF-26. To hit Tindal, China would have to push their missiles to their absolute limit, drastically reducing their payload and accuracy. Or they would have to develop an entirely new class of longer-range intercontinental ballistic missiles (ICBMs) to target it, which are far more expensive and scarce. By moving the bombers to Tindal, the US buys warning time. A missile flying to Australia takes significantly longer than one flying to Guam. That difference, measured in minutes, is the difference between a B-52 being destroyed on the tarmac and a B-52 being airborne, safe, and launching a counterstrike. This is the concept of strategic depth. Australia provides the depth that the islands of the Pacific cannot. You can sink an island base with a few warheads. You cannot sink the Australian Outback. The sheer vastness of the Northern Territory allows for dispersion, concealment, and survival in a way that a tiny island simply cannot match. But what are they actually bringing to the fight? You might look at the B-52 and think, that's a relic. That's a museum piece. It's true. The B-52 Stratofortress first flew in 1952. The airframes landing in Australia today were built while JFK was president. Their pilots are often the grandsons of the pilots who flew them in Vietnam. It is a subsonic, non-stealthy 8-engine beast that shows up on radar like a flying barn door. But do not let the age fool you. If you think the B-52 is just an old dumb bomb dropper, you are fighting the last war. The B-52H that will rotate through Tindal is not the plane that carpet-bombed Hanoi. It has been stripped down, rewired, re-engined, and transformed into an arsenal plane. In the modern era, the B-52 does not fly over the target. It doesn't need to. The B-52 is a missile truck. Its primary weapon today is the AGM-158B Jassamiar, Joint Air-to-Surface Standoff Missile Extended Range. This is a highly advanced, stealthy cruise missile with a range of nearly 1,000 kilometers. Here is the tactical nightmare for Beijing. A B-52 takes off from Tindal. It flies north, refuels over the Philippines Sea or the Celebes Sea. It sits 1,000 kilometers away from the Chinese coast, well outside the range of Chinese S-400 air defense systems and fighter patrols. It releases 20 JASSMER missiles from its internal rotary launchers and wing pylons. The B-52 turns around and flies home to have a beer in Katherine. Meanwhile, 20 stealth cruise missiles are skimming the waves at Mach 0.8, invisible to radar, hunting Chinese destroyers, radar sites, and command bunkers with autonomous precision. A flight of 6 B-52s, the number the new apron at Tindal is built for, can launch 120 stealth cruise missiles in a single volley. That is enough firepower to decapitate the entire air defense network of the Southern Theater Command. It is enough to sink an entire amphibious invasion fleet. And the plane that launched them never even appeared on a Chinese radar screen. This is why the B-52 is immortal. It doesn't matter that the airframe is old and has a massive radar cross-section, because it never enters the fight. It is the archer, not the arrow. And the arrow is getting sharper. The US is currently testing the AGM-183A Air-Launched Rapid Response Weapon, ARRW, a hypersonic missile. When these come online, the B-52s at Tindal will be able to launch projectiles that travel at Mach 20. A B-52 launching from Australia could strike targets in the South China Sea within minutes of launch, giving the enemy zero reaction time. By positioning these assets in Australia, the US ensures that even if their carriers are pushed back, and even if Guam is suppressed, they can still project massive, overwhelming firepower into the Taiwan Strait. The B-52 becomes the break glass in case of emergency, hammer that is always safe, always ready, and always loaded. The commitment to Tindal isn't just about painting parking spots on the tarmac. It involves a massive injection of cash and concrete that signals permanence. The U.S. Department of Defense budget documents reveal over $100 million allocated for construction at Tindal. They are building a squadron operations facility, a high-tech command center where mission planning happens. They are building maintenance facilities capable of handling the massive 185-foot wingspan of the buff, big ugly fat fellow. They are expanding the fuel farms to hold millions of liters of jet fuel, ensuring the bombers can fly repeated sorties even if the supply chain is disrupted. You don't pour that kind of concrete for a 2-week training exercise. You don't build hardened bunkers for transient aircraft. This is infrastructure for a rotational presence that is effectively permanent. It means that at any given time, there will likely be American bombers sitting on Australian soil, fully bombed up and ready to launch. This integrates RAAF Tindal into the US nuclear war plan. While the Australian government carefully insists that the US must ask permission to launch combat missions from Australian soil, the reality of alliance dynamics suggests that if the balloon goes up, if World War III starts, the answer will be yes. This makes Tindal a target. There is no point denying that. By hosting the Spear, you invite the shield bash. But it also makes Tindal a priority for defense. The presence of US strategic assets means that the US is now committed to defending Northern Australia with the same vigor it would defend Hawaii. It binds the two nations' fates together in a way that no treaty ever could. An attack on Tindal becomes an attack on the US nuclear triad. This construction is part of a broader web. It links with the massive commercial jet fuel reserves being built in Darwin to support the US fleet. It links with the nuclear submarine base in Perth, HMAS Sterling. It links with the critical spy base at Pine Gap in the center of the continent. Australia is being transformed into a continental-scale fortress, a garrison state for the 21st century. The message this sends to Beijing is one of checkmate. China's strategy relies on a knockout blow. They hope to win a war in the first 48 hours by blinding the US, destroying its forward bases, and creating a fait accompli before the American giant can wake up. They rely on shock and awe. The Tindal pivot denies them that victory. It tells Xi Jinping, you can hit Guam, you can hit Kadena, you can hit the carriers, but you cannot hit everything. And while you are exhausting your missile stocks on the islands, the heavy bombers will be taking off from the Outback, and they will be coming for you. It reintroduces the fear of the unknown. Chinese strategists now have to account for a strike force that is based outside their easy reach. It forces them to spread their surveillance assets thinner, trying to watch the Australian continent. It forces them to keep their fighters back to defend the mainland instead of pushing out into the Pacific. It imposes costs on Chinese planning. And in deterrence theory, imposing costs is how you prevent war. But there is a deeper layer here, one that speaks to Western pride and Australian nationalism. For a long time there was a fear in Canberra, and across the West, that as China rose the US would retreat. That they would eventually decide Asia was too hard, pull back to Hawaii, and leave Australia to fend for itself as a vassal of Beijing. The B-52s in Tindal prove the opposite. The US is entrusting its most valuable, most powerful, most iconic strategic assets to Australian soil. They are putting their big stick in our hands. They are anchoring their power in our geography. This confirms Australia's role not as a client state, but as the southern fortress. We are the anchor. When the rest of the Pacific is in flames, Australia is the granite rock that the alliance holds onto. We are the unsinkable aircraft carrier that secures the southern flank of the free world. The critics will scream about sovereignty. They will say we are painting a target on our backs. And they are right, we are. But in a world of wolves, there is no safety in being a sheep. Safety comes from being the den where the biggest wolf sleeps. The concrete aprons at Tindal are a declaration. They say that the alliance is not retreating. We are simply moving to higher ground. We are preparing for the long game. And as the sun sets over the red dirt of the Northern Territory, and the massive, distinct shadows of the B-52 stretch across the tarmac, the message to the north is clear. We are ready. We are out of range. And we are loaded. Thanks for watching Doctrine of War. Do you think hosting nuclear-capable bombers makes Australia safer, or does it drag us into a war we should avoid? Let us know in the comments below. Stay sharp, stay realistic, and we'll see you in the next one.